Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Penn Vicarage on this lovely Friday morning. Great to see you, and as always, thank you so much for being with us for our fellowship and friendship and for our Bible passage for today, continuing our adventure through the book of the prophet Isaiah. And today we are in chapter 34. You'll need your flak jackets and your hard hats on for this one. So without further ado, Isaiah chapter 34. Here goes. I'll read it to you first. I'll try and give you some thoughts about it afterwards. Draw near, O nations, to hear. O peoples, give heed. Let the earth hear and all that fills it, the world and all that comes from it. For the Lord is enraged against all the nations, and furious against all their hordes. He's doomed them, has given them over to slaughter. Their slain shall be cast out, and the stench of their corpses shall rise. The mountains shall flow with their blood. All the hosts of heaven shall rot away, and the skies roll up like a scroll. All their hosts shall wither like a leaf withering on a vine, or fruit withering on a fig tree. When my sword has drunk its fill in the heavens, lo, it will descend upon Edom, upon the people I have doomed to judgment. The Lord has a sword, it's sated with blood, it's gorged with the blood of lambs and goats, with the fat of the kidneys and rams. For the Lord has a sacrifice in Bozrah, a great slaughter in the land of Edom. Wild oxen shall fall with them, the young steers with the mighty bulls. Their land shall be soaked with blood, and their soil made rich with fat. For the Lord has a day of vengeance, a year of vindication by Zion's cause. And the streams of Edom shall be turned into pitch, and her soil into sulphur. Her land shall become a burning pitch. Night and day it shall not be quenched, its smoke shall go up forever. From generation to generation it shall lie waste. No one shall pass through it forever and ever. For the hawk and the hedgehog shall possess it, and the owl and the raven shall live in it. He shall stretch the line of confusion over it, and the plummet of chaos over its nobles. They shall name it No Kingdom there, and all its princes shall be nothing. Thorns shall grow over its strongholds, nettles and thistles in its fortresses. It shall be the haunt of jackals and abode for ostriches. Wild cats shall meet with hyenas, goat demons shall call to each other. There too Lilith shall repose, and find a place to rest. And there shall the owl nest, and lay and hatch, and brood its shadow. There too the buzzards shall gather, each one with its mate. Seek and read from the Lord the book of the Lord. Not one of these shall be missing, none shall be without its mate. For the mouth of the Lord has commanded, and his spirit has gathered them. He's cast a lot for them. His hand has portioned it out to them with the line. They shall possess it forever. From generation to generation they shall live in it. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay, let's start, my friends, by acknowledging that this is a very difficult and challenging passage. Confession, I got out of bed this morning, I thought, should I just skip it, go to chapter 35 and hope no one notices? I was very tempted. But no, it's in the Bible. And I think actually, difficult though this passage is, and we will look at it in a minute, I think it's good to acknowledge that you have to, if you're going to look at the Bible, you need to look at all the Bible. It's very tempting to look at the nice passages. We can look at passages about God so loved the world and everything. We can look at lovely, cuddly passages all day and all night. But actually, it's important that we get the whole of the scriptures. And even passages that make us uncomfortable, we need to work through those as well and listen to God through them. Otherwise, we're only getting is like a skewed picture. And I think a lot of people do get that. Why it's really important that we do like what we're doing now, which is to work our way consecutively through the scriptures so we get the tough bits as well as the nice bits, the comfortable bits. So let's start by acknowledging that Isaiah chapter 34 is a difficult passage. So if you find it difficult reading, you're not the only one. I found it difficult reading too. So let's just go with that. But let's learn the lesson firstly that we need to learn from all the scripture, not just the nice select bits, our favourite bits, the bits that we like. Okay, so what do we have here in chapter 34? Well, essentially we have a picture of doom and of destruction, of judgment, of divine anger, divine vengeance even, across this passage. And it's laid out in some pretty gory and poetic language. It's pretty clear that, you know, the trouble is coming, big trouble is coming, and it's laid out in some very gory details here. But even if, like some, you kind of pass it off as kind of exaggeration, or the fancy word for it is hyperbole, even if you say that, nonetheless, the message is an uncomfortable one, that there's a day of recompense to come. So what do you have in this passage is a clear description of divine vengeance and divine judgment here, especially laid out against the Edomites. Now, yes. So who were the Edomites? And why them in particular? Well, I think the thing about the Edomites is the commentators say is that throughout the history of what God's people were doing, they actively opposed them all the way. The people of God encountered various other countries and people en route, but it seems that every turn the Edomites opposed them. So I've got a few examples here. We have, and in a sense, they were close familiarly they were descendants of Esau, but for example, they opposed them as they went through the desert on the way in Numbers chapter 20, 14 to 21. When Babylon, when Jerusalem was taken into Babylon, it's thought that Edom actually encouraged Babylon to do it. And also when Judah downfell later, according to Obadiah verses 11 to 14, the Edomites in particular opposed them then and profited from it. So why the Edomites in particular? Well, they were people in particular who oppose God's people all the way. That seems to be why they seem to be particularly laid out here. And so that's the message about the Edomites. So just say a few things about passages then. I mean, so what you got here, as I say, is a description of God's judgment against various nations, but particularly against the Edomites. And the Edomites in particular, because they're the ones who oppose God all the way. Now let's just take on something from the beginning. A lot of people have this idea that kind of the Old Testament is full of blood, guts and gore, and the New Testament is all full of love and cuddliness. That simply isn't true. There are cuddly bits and nice bits in the Old Testament. I mean, Hosea chapter 11 is one of the loveliest, most heartfelt passages you could ever read about the heart of God. But also in the New Testament, there is some apocalyptic stuff too. If you've ever read anything in the book of Revelation, you'll know what I'm talking about here. And also there's a side of Jesus that we don't talk about very much as well, that Jesus got very angry in the temple. So I want to just squash this thing about the Old Testament being all blood, guts, and gore and thunder and so on. New Testament's full of cuddly love and all sorts of stuff. That simply isn't fair. There's cuddly stuff in the Old Testament, but there's also apocalyptic stuff in the New Testament as well. And I think it's important that we reckon if you read books like the book of Revelation and some of the passages of Paul as well, there's stuff about the wrath of God in there as well. So what I'm saying is you have the same God in the Old Testament as in the New Testament. And there are pictures in the New Testament of Jesus getting angry in the temple, injustice and so on. It's important to see that you see that we have the same God throughout the whole Bible. And it simply isn't accurate to say that the Old Testament, we could put it behind us, the New Testament, today, it's just, that isn't it's nonsense. So when does apocalyptic stuff come, and passages like this? We tend to find that they tend to be written during times of persecution. So, I mean, Isaiah himself, the understanding is that he actually lost his life. Sennacherib's men, it's thought that they killed Isaiah. So Isaiah himself was a persecuted person. And if you take the book of Revelation also, Revelation was written at a time of horrendous persecution from the Romans. Now, I think it's easy for us in the Western world, those of us who are in the Western world, to sit in judgment on people in other parts of the world, and so because we know better, don't we? Because we don't think vengeful thoughts like that. And there was even a section a few years ago in the Psalms of taking out all the imprecatory bits and put them in brackets, and so you don't have to say them if you don't want to. Well, I think that's actually very Western and very quite pompous, really, because there are parts of the world today where people lose their life for their faith. I mean, the most difficult thing I'm going to have going to church this morning is crossing the road and whether I've left my keys behind or something. There are people across the world today who will potentially risk their lives and their families' lives by going to church. If you were part of a congregation where a gunman had come in the previous weekend and gunned down half the congregation, you might feel rather differently. And I think for people in that position, and for much of the Christian world, the idea of a day of reckoning, a day when justice will be done, the day when wrongs are put right, when wrongs are punished, actually is very important to them. And I think it's right that we recognise that as well. That we recognise that many of us are looking at this from a Western perspective, thinking we don't like to think vengeful thoughts like that, we don't like to think of God like that, and so on. But for much of the world where the church is persecuted, and let's not forget that the Christianity is the most persecuted group in the world, we tend to forget that, for people who are persecuted, the idea of a day of wrath, a day of reckoning, a day of judgment, a day when things are put right, could actually be, because is actually very important. So it's important to recognise that and remember that, you know, we're not the only Christians in the world. And for many people across the world today, the idea of a day as a day of reckoning is very important, a day when justice is done, when God speaks, God acts, and injustice is punished. But finally, I think the main message from this, however uncomfortable, is just to learn the lesson very simply. Just don't oppose God. You know, the Edomites got focused on in particular, and it wasn't because they had some particular sexual proclivity or whatever. The reason they were focused on here, they were identified in particular here, is because they opposed God everywhere, every way they went. And I think the lesson for us, my friends, is, to put it bluntly, God is God, and God is Almighty God. God's the one who made the world, and God's the one who will end the world, and God holds the world in his hands. So let's work with God rather than against God. Let's not oppose God like the Edomites do. Let's live life God's way, and let's just learn let's allow him to have his just and gentle rule. Let's in our lives say, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Let's not oppose God. Let's work with God. Let's work with God. Let's live life according to the Maker's instructions. Let's not oppose him like the Edomites did, and like many do today. Let's make sure that we are serving God, putting God first, putting him in his rightful place. And let's make sure that we are listening to God, doing what God says, and enjoying his presence and fellowship today. I hope that's made some sense of a very, very difficult passage. Have a lovely weekend, friends. By the way, chapter 35 on Monday is gorgeous. You'll love it. Have a lovely weekend. Do join us at church. We'd absolutely love to see you.